2023. Item 1, apologies. I've had an apology from Peter Spink. I think Dave Adams is subbing for him. There's a vacant seat there that has Councillor Quirk's name on it. I haven't heard from him, but he may be along. Is that a vacancy? No. Everyone else, I think, is present, and Susie's sitting at the back for, what did we say, health reasons. Thank you. There is a meeting, or public meeting on school place planning during this meeting, which is a cause of some frustration that it was scheduled to coincide, especially as we have the matter of the amalgamation of Chillerton and Rookley School on our agenda. Is there any member of this committee who's intending to leave early in order to go to that? Councillor Love and Councillor Downer. Fine, thank you. I hope we'll get to the Chillerton and Rookley item before you have to leave. That's the intention. Yeah, it is its first substantive item after the initial agenda items. So item 2, minutes of the meeting. Do I have a proposer to confirm that they're a true record of our meeting held on 6th of June? Councillor Quigley, seconded by Councillor Drew. All those in favour? That's every abstentions and anyone against. So carried with 1 abstention. Just sign those. Item 3, declarations of interest. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. I'm an Associate Governor of Chillerton and Rookley and Godshill Schools.
Thank you. So with particular reference to item 7. Item 4, public question time. I've not been given anything in writing. Unless there are any questions from the gallery, we have no public questions. Item 5, progress update, pages 27 to 28. Now, there are a number of items here that have to do with checking. 10th of January forward plan. The committee requested a copy of the review of leisure centres once it had been completed. Our update on the 9th of May was that the Cabinet is still in the process of gathering data and anticipate the review being ready for autumn. Is that still on track?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so expect that in autumn.
Obviously, we're constantly reviewing, especially the SALEX funded works, which are, production. They also have an impact on our of and just to say on that, we are just about to put in an application for the Sporting the funding opportunity, some of which is for more energy saving items, and secondly, some revenue.
Okay, thank you. 7th of February, asset management property rationalisation. So this is the heads of agreement in relation to the proposed disposal of Kingston Marine Park, to be circulated once they're signed. We haven't had anything yet. Do we assume they haven't been signed?
Yeah, I had an update this afternoon. So it's all going steam ahead still, but we haven't reached that point where they've actually been signed. Things are moving right.
Any indication of when you think they may be signed at all?
I wouldn't like to say because it's out of my control, but we are actively engaged with them twice a weekly basis, keep in touch with the region teams. As soon as you know, as soon as I know, you'll know.
Thank you. Cowes Floating Bridge. So this was the request by this committee that the confidential settlement be shown to, I think, 3 named members of the committee. I've just spoken to the leader of the council, who has indicated that she doesn't have an issue with that, but we agreed to speak again so that a formal response could be provided. Thank you.
If I may, Chair, I'd like to thank you for that and to thank you for your understanding in this sensitive and complicated matter. And your approach to the leader is welcomed, and I'm sure that we will resolve the matter in a manner that suits all parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Love.
Thank you. We also had a response which you've just seen placed in front of you in response to my questions I asked, and I thank the member for his response. So is the compensation received from the floating bridge settlement ring-fenced? And the response was yes, the settlement figure is ring-fenced for the floating bridge. And the second bit was, will the compensation settlement figure be used to replace the vessel? And the answer is yes, the settlement figure will be used to replace the vessel. In that event, due process would need to be followed. Thank you.
Slight correction, Carl. The settlement would be used to replace the floating bridge.
Yeah. Thank you. So that was also on the progress on action update. 6th of June, Strategic Manager for Housing to deliver a presentation to all councillors in order for the scope of any potential task and finish group to be established. I think this was something offered by the Cabinet member, the Deputy Leader, who's not here. Do we know whether that's happening anytime soon, or is that something to go back to the Deputy Leader?
I can support with a response to that, Chairman. The position is one that's fluctuating. There will be two sessions, one relating to finances around accommodation and housing on the island, and the second a briefing in relation to the programmes that are underway. We're currently liaising with the Section 151 officer to get the finance meeting in the diary first, because it seems sensible that general briefing follows from that discussion. As soon as that's available, we circulate dates, and the Cabinet member has been most vocal in the intent that that will be an all meeting. So everyone will be invited to attend both of those sessions.
Okay, thank you. And any rough indication as to timeline for that?
The Section 151 officer is quite tied up at the moment working on the island deal piece of finance work that's going into central government. We believe that will be finished within the next 2 weeks, so he'll then be moving to prepare for the briefing session around housing. So I would hope that we would see that early part of September, allowing for some holidays over the summer period, but that may be able to be brought subject to availability.
Thank you. And the final item was something I took away from the last meeting, which was to liaise with the Chief Executive and Cabinet Member for Finance about the possibility of more regular finance updates. So this is, at the moment, we have quarterly reporting, obviously, for all departments, whether there was scope for more regular updates for finance. I think it was a general mood amongst this committee last time that probably wouldn't be necessary, although I accept it was proposed by one of our members or a substitute on this committee. I have spoken to the Chief Executive and the Cabinet Member for Finance, and I think the three of us are in agreement that quarterly reporting on finance is probably the most appropriate. So unless the committee jump up and down and oppose that, I think we'll say that is dealt with for the moment. Fine, I can see some nods. Good, okay. Item 6. So this is the forward plan and the committee's work programme. Is there anyone on this committee who'd like to see something go onto the work programme? I've got one item, but we'll open it up to members. So I think for me, it was the housing affordability supplementary planning document that's due to go for cabinet on the 14th of September. So we could put that on our work plan for on the agenda for the next meeting. Yeah, is everyone happy with that? Fine, unless there's anything else. Item 7, pre-decision scrutiny, amalgamation of Chillerton and Rookley Primary School with Godshill Primary School. Did Cabinet Member Councillor Andre want to say anything by way of introduction?
The paper has been published, as you know. It's coming to Cabinet on Thursday. I don't think there's really anything I need to add to the paper, but I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Any questions or comment from the committee? Councillor Downer.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Andre. Have all pupils from Chillerton and Rookley been amalgamated into Godshill Primary School for teaching? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Downer. I can say that as part of the ongoing conversations, every parent of a pupil that remained in Chillerton was spoken to by the head and had agreed that the right move was for their child to go to Godshill. As we know, there is parental choice. So it's not for us as a local authority to dictate where children go, but I can confirm that it was the decision of parents in consultation with the head that the remaining pupils at Chillerton would be educated at Godshill. Thank you.
Given the distance between Godshill and Chillerton, what are the transport implications?
That will be a separate piece of work that we will look at. I would stress that the decision is coming to Cabinet on Thursday. So no decision has been made at this point, but that is definitely one of the factors that will be addressed should Cabinet approve the paper on Thursday.
Thank you.
Councillor Love.
Thank you, Chair. I think my only comment really is that this whole process has taken far too long to arrive at this point. It started in 2021 in January, and for various different reasons, which we all know about, it's gone on a long time. And I think that I would hope that the learning from this would be that a speedy resolution from the point of it being announced to the point of making the decisions, which is actually this week, at the Cabinet, is far too long, and that destabilises the community. It gives rise to misconceptions and all kinds of problems. And I would hope that moving forward, that when we enter into a point where a school or schools might have to face closure, because I'm not saying they would close, because a whole consultation process would need to go in place, that it's done as speedily and possibly, certainly within a year, rather than the 3 years that this has taken. That would be my only, because I think that supports parents. So there's some learning there from that, and I just want to put that on the table. I think that's really, really important to the issue of the community.
Thank you, Councillor Love. I agree with what you say. And in the context of the answer to Councillor Downer, and this has been on the agenda for 2 years, and to hear that considerations around transport are to be addressed. I mean, I'm amazed within the last 2 years that this hasn't been something that's at the forefront of the minds of yourself or the department, and there wouldn't be some indication of how pupil transport will be addressed. If I could also add, I'm still concerned at the paperwork around school closures, and presumably there'll be more paperwork to come, lacks detail. I made that comment at the last scrutiny meeting in relation to a paper that's now been pulled. But even on this paper, executive summary, paragraphs 3 and 4, it notes that the Cabinet reviewed the outcome of this consultation on the 10th of February 2022, so last year, and took the decision to defer, which we know about. The next paragraph says further options are being considered, but due to very low numbers on the roll, etc., etc. Well, what further options are being considered? You know, there is no detail, and it refers to it again paragraph 13, further options were considered. What were they between February 22 and now?
The decision regarding Chillerton and Rookley was the first decision that came across my desk, it's perfectly fair to say, when I became the lead member. We listened very carefully to parents and to members of the public, and they were telling us that they wanted to keep the school open. So, as Councillor Love alluded to, this has been an ongoing process. We have done everything that we possibly did that we could do to try to keep the school open. But this is, as with any process, it's an ongoing process. So I think if you're just looking at one particular paper, it is an ongoing process. So out of context, so for context, it did start 2 years ago. We have to follow certain due processes. But as I say, we did look at all the different options, but listening to parents, but it has got to a point where we gave the opportunity for the numbers to increase, but the numbers did not increase.
Thank you. I think the problem I've got is there's a paper here yet again that says further options have been considered, and that's to keep a school open. And there's just no reference to what those options were that were considered. And it's the same problem with the paperwork last month. And if it's going to be the same problem with ongoing paperwork coming out of children's services, public and parents are going to get more frustrated than they already are.
Corporate Scrutiny Committee can also shape policy, Chair, with this, as I'm sure you're aware. If you have recommendations that you want to make as to what you consider to be an appropriate level of detail, then I'm very happy to hear them. Thank you.
I certainly don't want to stand in the way of children's services scrutiny, but I think these papers would be much improved if statements like further options have been considered, those options are then particularised. And this does seem to be an ongoing issue with the paperwork, but I'll leave it in your hands, in the hands of your department. Any other comments, Councillor Quigley?
Yeah, no one sensible wants to close schools, but the way schools are funded it's inevitable on the island. You know, we've got 8 spare primary school classes. The danger is that this is given a forerunner to the next round of school closures, and it looks like we're not in control of the process. Now, as 39 councillors, so I think we need to all take this on the chin together, we haven't really supported the officers to do what they need to do, whatever administration has been in charge. And we haven't reassured parents that we are in control of the process. And that's what I think we need to do moving forward. So this should be the example of how we don't do it next time round. Now, if that means you need help from us at corporate scrutiny, children's scrutiny, then that's what we do. But we're trying to nail a bowl of soup to a rocking horse and expecting it to not empty itself out. There's going to be no popular decision here. I think I've stressed this point many times at children's scrutiny, is we've got officers working like no tomorrow, doing 25 hours a day, trying to come up with a sensible plan. And then it gets thrown back into the political process, and we're all guilty of making it not work. So I think the commitment from us on corporate scrutiny and children's scrutiny is we will help you make it work, but we are going to question the process because it needs to be in control.
Thank you, Councillor Quigley. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment? No. Thank you.
If I can just come back in, just to highlight, as you did at the beginning of this meeting, if I may, Chair, that we do have a public briefing tonight at Medina Theatre at 6:30 to actually explain about the school planning process. And this is a meeting for parents, and anyone that wants to come would be very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I made the comment at the beginning, anyone other than those who are committed to this meeting, but thank you. Thank you. Item 8, pre-decision scrutiny, empty property strategy, pages 57 to 80. The strategy is in front of you. I don't think we haven't got Cabinet Member Ian Stevens here. I don't know whether Laura Gordian wanted to, I mean, don't really have to say anything introductory. It speaks for itself, but do if you'd like to.
I'm very happy to let the paper speak for itself. It's the first time in a long time we've reviewed the empty property strategy, and it's our view that what it presents is an incredibly pragmatic approach to managing empty properties on the island that's aligned to the national legislative position and frameworks, but also gives the local authority teeth in that space for probably the first time in a long time. So the opportunity to do something different through the policy is one that we relish the opportunity to implement.
Are there any comments, Councillor Quigley?
I'm going to speak in favour because I think Dawn's done a great job. That said, I don't want to all just walk away thinking everything's fantastic, but it is. You know, we've come from a position of anecdotally thinking the empty property issue on the island is going to solve homelessness. This is quite clear. I don't think it could be clearer in this report that we're effectively talking about 109 properties that we can do anything with. Now, resources are being put to possible solutions from what I can see, but it's not worth the amount of effort as it will be as building properties. So I think, well done, I think, Dawn, really, because it's very clear now. The interesting thing from this is the number of properties that are being charged 300% council tax, which again is a success on council officers being able to do something about it. So for me, this is, in terms of reports coming in front of corporate scrutiny, this is what I want to see. All the numbers are there, what we can expect to happen, absolutely spot on for me. It's just a shame it doesn't solve a housing crisis. Councillor Love.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we discussed this paper at the. It wasn't. Sorry.
Don't worry about it, Carl. Go on.
No.
We've got plenty of time.
So, Councillor Love, it's a good point. I was going to introduce it by saying actually items 8 or 9, although they're not particularly linked, do, in my view, have overlap. And actually, it's a comment I was going to make that I think they should have more explicit overlap. But carry on.
So I mean, I think I make so the acquisition strategy. Am I looking at the right paper? 83. Yeah, sorry, I'm looking at the.
So, fine.
I'll come back on. Sorry.
Anyone else? I think my comments on it are sort of related to the acquisition strategy as well. I slightly, I mean, it's very useful to have that information, and I'm very grateful for that information, and to see that the numbers are not huge. As Councillor Quigley said, it's not going to solve the housing crisis by bringing every empty property, into the market. I do worry as a strategy, there is not a huge amount of detail on the how, but balance that against, even if the strategy was 100% successful, it's not going to change the world either. So it's a question of how much resource do you put into dealing with an issue that's not going to solve the overriding problem. But I think my comments around more detail probably more relate to the acquisition strategy. Should we move on to the acquisition strategy? Item 9. So this was discussed at Neighbourhoods and Regen Scrutiny. I understand there are a number of comments made. So the overriding feedback from that committee, and if anyone was there and don't think I've got this right, let me know, but I have spoken to Councillor Stewart, the chair of the committee, that the overriding comments were there's a lack of detail. The committee spent a long time offering feedback, and I understand there are now a whole list of bullet points of suggestions as to how you deliver, and that Councillor Stevens was invited or offered to withdraw the paper from Cabinet in order to allow that extra work to go in. And I understand there was a difference of opinion on that committee, and in the end they didn't recommend withdrawing it from Cabinet. I think I would have taken a different view. I think I've seen so many bullet points and good stuff that the last committee suggested should go into that paper, that it might be more fruitful to do that before it goes to Cabinet on Thursday. Councillor Love.
Thank you. I haven't seen the list of recommendations that you're talking about. They may well have been sent out this afternoon. The recommendation was about making recommendations to the Cabinet that wasn't specific. So I haven't seen that list of bullet points, but the points that you make are accurate. It was felt important not to hold up the process of implementing the strategy, and that it could be amended as we moved along. I think there were a couple of things that were quite important, which was that it wasn't that there was lots of problems with detail. I think the specific detail points were that we needed some hard and fast targets about we're going to deliver A in this time frame, and so as to help focus the mind in trying to deliver it by a particular time, recognising that there are other projects that could come along in between. But by setting some timescales against specific projects, then that helps focus the mind to actually deliver them and brings it back to the table because there's a time frame there within it. I think one of the specific issues which I had, was point 18, which we made some recommendations, which said, whilst the strategy does not directly impact on reducing the number of residents, especially children and families living in poverty, that just doesn't sit well at all in this document because of course it does have an impact upon poverty, because people who are homeless might have children, you know, and that has an impact on poverty, and we know that the disproportionately poverty impacts. So that point 18 needed some work, and I believe that some work has been done on that. As I haven't seen the points, I don't know if that's been, I'm asking, it has been changed, has that?
It has been included in the list of recommendations that was sent to the committee, the Neighbours and Regen Committee members this afternoon.
To re-look at them?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. That's why I questioned about making recommendations, because some of the members haven't seen what the recommendations are that some of the members have sent forward, which is absolutely ridiculous. So, because I haven't seen it. Even though it's probably been sent this afternoon, that's not in a good timely way. But we wanted this to go forward irrespective of the amendments being made later, because it is a step forward.
Sorry, I might be getting the wrong end of the stick here, but for today's pre-scrutiny, it's just acquisition for homelessness, isn't it? Not the full acquisition strategy.
Yes, acquisition.
Yeah, but I think you're talking about the full acquisition strategy, because the acquisition strategy for homeless accommodation, I mean, okay, there may be some detail you could add, but to me that seems pretty complete.
Yeah, I think the point is that, yeah, we were saying that there are lots of good elements about it, but by putting some timelines on it for particular acquisitions, then it brings it back to the table to be discussed, and it's too woolly in that respect. So by adding that extra little bit of detail, it strengthens the document and it helps focus the minds of this committee and the officers delivering it. That's kind of where we're going.
Well, Councillor Quigley has a look at that. I mean, I think it's light on the how. You know, it's good on the problem, and then how you deal with that problem and how you go on and acquire those strategies. I just think there's lack of detail. I think there's another slightly missed opportunity between these two strategies, and that is if there are 600 odd properties that have been empty for more than 6 months, isn't that an opportunity potentially for the council to house people who are currently in bed and breakfast and caravans? And that wouldn't necessarily lead to an acquisition, but the council could presumably approach owners of empty properties and say, can the council lease them in order to provide less temporary accommodation than a bed and breakfast? And I see about £1 million is being spent on bed and breakfast, caravans and hostels. That would go quite a long way if it was converted into spending on properties that are currently empty. Of course, it does require landlords to agree, and I'm not suggesting there would necessarily be a huge number and it would solve the problem. But the fact that that's not even referred to as a possibility, I think is a missed opportunity. Councillor Quigley.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but probably Dawn's the best person to answer this. I do believe that was considered, because my understanding of a lot of work's been done over the last year on the empty property strategy has been contacting landlords, and some of it's probate, some of it's just doing the property job. Also taking people out of insecure temporary accommodation and put them into a house, which may then pull under after another 6 months. I know what you're saying, but I think we're looking at the wrong. I do worry that this is just one part of the total acquisition strategy. And to me, this seems relatively clear: is deliver and facilitate a programme of £100 per year through the council-led activity over the life of the strategy, which falls in with the numbers. I think the empty property strategy is something very different. We are in danger as a committee confusing those two things, but Dawn would be the best person to answer that.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, yeah, Councillor Quigley said there two different things, but there are 600 empty properties on the island empty for more than 6 months. The council is spending £1 million on bed and breakfast, caravans and hostels. Seems to be at least a partial solution or potential solution that sits there, and it's not referred to in any detail. I think if the council could approach landlords, and instead of giving them a leaflet into how to get their property back in the market, that leaflet or advice, I think it refers to advice, advising landlords, could be, by the way, the council might be interested in taking leases and getting your property back into the market, albeit the rental market and the below market rent for people who need a home. I thought there might be an opportunity there, but perhaps officers could respond. Thank you.
Yeah, the point is actually picked up exactly the point you raise within the action plan. It talks about ensuring awareness of the landlord's incentive scheme, which is the scheme that the council operates to rent private sector properties effectively. So we would be promoting that scheme to people, to the empty property owners. I think in relation to the 600 that you talk about, the majority of those properties turn round very quickly. They'll be probate or they will be put on the market to sell. So the longer term ones are the ones that we're focusing on, because clearly they're not being used. But there is a reference to exactly what you say around us renting those properties within the strategy.
Thank you. I mean, the longer term, more than 2 years, there's only 109 properties. Okay, all right. Councillor Love.
I think we have to recognise that it's a very complex issue, and that I mean, I don't know, but the longer term, the longer those properties are empty, the more effort they take to return to the market, and a significant number of those properties will fall into that category. We only have the number of officers that we have to be able to do that work. It might be that some additional resource might be needed to be redirected to that, or they may already be well on the case for that. I think that's a question that I would kind of like to know: is that have we got enough resource to do what's necessary to bring those properties back quickly?
Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your question, Councillor Love. And I think I refer back to a comment that Councillor Quigley made earlier, in that if you look at all of these things in the round, they are all part of the toolbox that the council has to consider how it addresses housing need on the island. And we need to balance where we put our resources in terms of getting the most value out of the money we're investing. So I think we've indicated that the housing problem is not going to be solved by the empty property issue. It's not going to be solved alone by acquisition. It's not going to be solved alone by building, but we do need, with a limited amount of, whether that's staffing resource, revenue budget or capital spend, we need to balance that to make sure that we get the best as a whole. So I think we need to look at it as a whole and not pick at it individually. So I think the opportunity that members will be given in terms of the housing briefing that's going to be put into diaries, to start looking at that as a whole and seeing how much value the different components of the toolbox have, I think will be really valuable.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
The housing needs survey combines various cases in each category. For example, those with too little accommodation with those with too much. This obscures the actual need. So would a cabinet member commit to evaluating a version of the table with expanded columns for each that show the qualifying need and how many of those with deficient accommodation will be assisted by this plan? Need a little more detail. Those that haven't got enough, those that have got too much. Needs breaking down further.
Is that today is more detail on the data, broken down figures, doable, achievable?
In terms of the granularity, in terms of the detail of the data, it does become difficult when we're talking specifically about homelessness. The picture is one that fluctuates. So at any given time, the number of people within a family unit or a household unit can vary. To pull that detail out on a consistent basis becomes rather difficult. What we're doing at the moment, when we're looking at the acquisition strategy, when we're looking at what we're buying to support homeless people and homeless families on the island, is considering the specific needs of the cohort at that moment in time. That's why we currently have a blend of bed and breakfast accommodation, caravan accommodation, and some privately leased accommodation that we're able to support people through. The acquisition strategy puts us in a slightly stronger place because we'll have consistent access to accommodation that can fit multiple purpose use. So different types and sizes of family unit, of households will be able to access accommodation more regularly and in a more consistent and stable way. That's why it's so important that strategy instead of the piecemeal way in which we're having to meet need at the moment due to a lack of consistent supply.
Also, there's been talk of modular housing providers, and could I ask, have we had any quotations for modular housing to supply? How many we've had? How many other quotations in progress? And how do other suppliers engage to provide such quotations? Because I believe modular housing is a good way forward to this. It's getting back to Joe's point earlier. It's this, and with what Wendy just said, and Richard as well, obviously this is a multifaceted problem. There's no one simple solution. But I think the modular housing could be a big part of that solution. And I think we also need to keep that, Joe. I would like to keep this as much as possible in control of the Isle of Wight Council. So we're in control of our own destiny. Once we fund this and get this in place, I believe this could be a big, big win.
So we're very good point. I agree with you. We're going slightly off track, I think. But is there anyone who wants to give a sort of summary response to that?
I was just going to say, Chair, if you don't mind, I think that does take us out of the realms of pre-scrutiny decision around both of the papers in front of you, but happy to take that away as a question for the Cabinet member to respond to and provide to scrutiny for the next meeting.
Fine, thank you. Councillor Lever.
I guess just to wrap us up, Chair, I think both of the strategies we've seen are really solid tools, as Wendy said, and I think I'm just looking forward to seeing how they're going to be used in the broader piece when we look at housing in the round. So, good job.
Thank you. Any final comments before we move on? Item 10, capital programme, capital strategy, page 97 to 104. So this is a report on the lines of inquiry agreed by the committee at its meeting on 10th of May 2022. So that's 10th of May last year. So it's taken a while. I'll have to refresh our memories. I think we've got the section 151 officer, Chris Ward, online. I don't know whether he wants to say anything by way of introduction. Chris, don't feel you have to, but if you want to speak now.
Thank you, Chair. No, happy to. I guess much of the response to this is captured within documents that you hopefully will already be familiar to you. So the capital strategy itself is part of the annual budget report that comes to council each February. And so there's much of the questions that have been posed by scrutiny are captured within the capital strategy itself. And the other part of the other main part of the questions posed by scrutiny are probably captured by the quarterly monitoring reports that are provided through QPMR3. So that's just by way of introduction, but clearly if there are any questions that you'd like to ask me, then I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Quigley.
Yes. I know there's an answer to a lot of questions in the back, but my concern compared to the last two strategies is that I could probably make a summary after reading the other two documents of what strategies were in terms of number of houses and number of people it helped. There's no numbers in the capital programme strategy, capital strategy, which concerns me because I don't know how we'll measure it, whether it's successful or not. Now, I might be missing something, Chris. I might be missing another document where you've laid the numbers out in, because I know you're good at laying numbers out in great length. So it's not a criticism of your ability with numbers, but from this, I'm not picking up anything in terms of a measurable strategy.
Mr. Ward.
Sure.
To respond to that, thank you.
So the capital strategy itself sets the tone, if you like, for the capital programme. Capital programme should be a representation of the council's capital strategy. So it becomes the plan derived from the strategy itself. So the capital programme obviously is part of the budget report that goes to council each year. The capital programme looks at a period over 5 years. Capital strategy itself seeks to identify how resources are allocated to the council's priorities, and the capital programme obviously is a representation therefore of the council's capital priorities. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Councillor Downer.
Thank you, Chairman. I know this might be a bit off of what we're supposed to be talking about, but what I would like to know is, with the recent interest rate rises of the Bank of England, how does that impact on interest from the council's borrowings?
Thank you. Chris Ward.
Okay, on the whole, I'm going to answer this in 2 parts if I can. On the whole, much of the council's borrowing is at fixed rates. So the borrowing for all previous capital investment is fixed. So in that sense, it doesn't impact on the council's budget. When we look forward, so any borrowing that has yet to be undertaken for capital investment in the capital programme that's been approved, that becomes more expensive for the council. So it has an impact more about future viability of any capital investment that is due to be funded by borrowing. And you've talked about it in your last 2 items as well. You've talked about housing quite a lot. So viability for anything that requires borrowing, housing will be one of those examples, becomes more challenged now that interest rates are significantly higher than we've been used to over recent years.
Councillor Downer.
Thank you, Chairman. May I have a supplementary, please, Mr. Ward? Are there any fixed terms of borrowing coming to the end of their life, and so will impact on the how much sort of interest rate rise will that come into play?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So, and I think I'd quite like to give you a little bit of assurance about how we plan our borrowing. So, if you ever have the opportunity to look through the council's treasury management strategy, and this goes to audit committee as well, you'll see that part of the council's overall treasury management strategy looks at our debt portfolio. And whenever we are considering taking out borrowing, one of the things that we take carefully into consideration is what we describe as the debt maturity. So when do they come up for their repayment? And we will want to make sure that we don't have lots of borrowing all coming up for repayment at the same time, because ordinarily what we do is once a loan comes up for repayment and it's repaid, we will then have to probably take out a new loan to replace the loan that we've just repaid. What we don't want to do is to be overly exposed in any short period of time to interest rates. So we always look to have what we describe as an even maturity profile. So that's a spread of when our borrowings come up for repayment. So on that basis, yes, we do have each year we tend to have some borrowing that comes up for repayment, or at least across a short period of time, and it will have an impact. But because not all of our borrowing comes up at the same time, the impact is managed, and we have factored that into the council's future financial forecasts. So we always take a forecast to the council as part of the budget report, and we forecast current year +3. So it's almost like a 4-year revenue forecast. So all of that additional cost should be factored into our forecasts moving forward already.
I think I might have understood a little bit of the gist of it, but thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Quigley.
Yeah, this isn't directed at anyone particularly. It's probably government diktat that says it. But to me, I'm worried. It just looks like a list of reasons we can't invest in anything, especially housing. You know, it just gets more and more difficult. The chances of us being able to build and own truly affordable housing seem to get further and further away every year. And I don't doubt we're going to come into another budget round soon that will insist we save another 2 or 3 million. So more of an observation than anything else. I don't really expect much of a response other than we really need to find a way of being able to invest in homes for people. And I can't see it at the moment.
Yeah, I think more work with housing associations would be a good start. But yeah, Councillor Love.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same really, is that I'd really like in future, if it's possible, to rather than look at what the blocks are, to look at what we can do with what we've got, so to turn that around. Chris, for me, it's very wordy, is the document, I have to say. And I was sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, just in the first sentence, you know, in terms of the financial strategy is to maximise the capital resources available, and then target the investment. And it's just very, very wordy for me as a committee member. I just want, without asking you to do a lot of work in future, can you simplify it a bit, please? Because it is really wordy. But I am pleased to see that we're going to get a financial, it says finance staff will liaise with the project managers to produce a monthly finance report. And now I think that's quite good news, so that we should be able to have better understanding as a group of finances. I wondered whether if we ought to receive that financial information, because that was a discussion from earlier. I don't know how useful that might or might not be.
Chief Executive.
I think that comes back to the point we discussed earlier, Chair, about quarterly reporting, because quarterly reporting will give you your update on your capital project as well. And I think what you'll see moving forward is we've been very good at budget monitoring in the past, but what we're moving into is budget management. So you'll see different sorts of reports coming forward as part of the QPMR in the future as well.
Councillor Love.
I think my concern is what Councillor Quigley was saying earlier, is that there seems to be lots of reasons why we can't do that. So by having the monthly returns, I'm hoping that there might be some indications of what the blocks might be within that and what we need to do to change that position to move forward. Because as I said in the previous meeting, you know, if I was a person who's homeless, I just want you to build some more houses. I don't care how, I just want you to get on and do it. And I think that we've become a little bit, I've got the right word here, risk averse in this council. We need to start taking more risks. And I know that there are risks, that there are inevitable, which of course that's risk is the word that I'm on that our 151 officer won't like me saying, but I think we need to take more risks if we're going to turn this situation around, to try to overcome those blocks in the financial system. If we don't take more risks, we won't build houses because everything's working against us on paper. So that's why I say if we have more positive, we've got this amount of money, we've got this amount of projects, and we can deliver this, this and this with it, rather than actually the talk behind the paper, where we can't do that because we haven't got the money. We need to move from a negative to a positive, and that's kind of all that I'm really saying.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Love. I mean, I've spent quite a lot of time over the last 18 months asking the council to provide a business case or business plan for building houses. That hasn't been forthcoming, and it's been promised at times. It hasn't been forthcoming. So I would agree with you on that side. I think before any financial case is made, there needs to be a business plan for building what, where, how, why, etc. And I would have thought that's the next step. That was the next step a year ago. It was the next step 6 months ago. I think it's still the next step. I've been approached by housing associations because they feel not enough is being done. And we seem to be going nowhere.
Chair, may I respond? I think the problem is we can spend a lot of time developing plans and not a lot of time delivering. And so whilst I think that a small scale business plan could be on 2 sides of an A4 sheet produced, I think the real important thing is delivering the properties. And what I am consistently hearing is that we don't have the money to deliver A, B, C and D. And what I'm suggesting is, and I know it's difficult for people to accept, is that we become a little bit more risk averse and we say, those are the properties, those 10 properties there, we haven't quite got enough money in the bank or whatever to do it. It's a little bit of a risk, but let's do it anyway and take the hit if we need to, because we're not moving. That's kind of what I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting that we spend £40 million and hope that we get it back. I'm saying that for some of those smaller projects, we become more risk averse and we get on and we do it. Because at the moment, we're building virtually nothing.
I mean, you still need a business case to justify drawing down the money and justify the risk. I agree with you. It wouldn't take long. I think we agree with each other. Yeah, it shouldn't take long. Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. I feel I ought to say something as my name's on the paper. But just really to pick up on those comments by Councillor Love and particularly Councillor Quigley. My role, but shared with the rest of the Cabinet and the arrangement we currently have, is to give the strategic direction to Mr Ward. And I can be a bit blunt at times, and I've told him I want solutions, not reiterating the problems. As Councillor Quigley says, there is a lot in our way finding those solutions, but the interest is not in repeating there's a difficulty here, there's something we have to take into account. It's taking forward the solutions that we can find. But as Richard says, it is not easy.
Any other comments? No. Chris Ward, thank you very much. That's helpful. I think the detail is helpful, actually. That's my view on this. This is a general comment. It's taken over a year to get that strategy, so we asked for this on the 10th of May 2022, and actually the same comment goes for the next item, performance management framework. That's hung over from October 2022. So I think is a general comment. Thank you, Chief Executive.
Chairman, if I may, and if you don't mind, the request of scrutiny to put it on the agenda was given at those dates. It was actually the scrutiny agenda setting that sets and the programme setting that sets when those come forward. It's not been because we haven't, as officers or staff groups, wanted to bring those forward. It's been a matter of how your work programme's been set.
I'll blame the former chair of this committee. Yeah,
I'll accept the blame, actually, because that's a sensible answer, Wendy. Thank you.
Councillor Bacon.
And just to underline something Mr Ward said before, this information is pretty much in its entirety contained in the budget papers each year. So it has been there, sitting there as part of public documents, ready for anyone to look at. But this, what we've done today, is really a summation of pre-existing budget material and quarterly reporting.
Thank you. Item 11, performance management framework, pages 105 to 112. I think it's got the Chief Executive's name on and it's got Councillor Bacon's name on. I don't know whether you, again, don't feel you have to, but if you did want to make any introductory remarks, please do.
Very briefly, it's effectively an interim report. A review has been carried out. You'll see what has been done in that regard in, I think it's section 4 of the report. The findings, some lack of consistency in various areas, but the actions going ahead. Next steps, section 7 on page 111. I think it's quite clear that everything is under development, so really the report is offered up to the committee to update themselves, find where they are, and if there's any feedback or comment to give upon that, it is welcome.
Councillor Quigley.
question to Chief Executive and Councillor Bacon. Are you happy with the interim report, and is it the direction you're going? Because I know we've been very critical of saying that measures seem to mean nothing. We get lots of green lights, but we're not necessarily feeling like a green light council. So does it make more sense to you?
I really want to see where we're going from the reviews that have taken place. I'm not sure that question can be answered until we see the outcome of the work. I'm happy that the work is proceeding, but yeah, we want clear measures. We do sometimes seem to pick measures that are only picked because they're an easy one to pluck a figure out for, but then they don't really tell us how things are operating. So, for example, randomly number of planning applications determined in time. It's a figure you can readily identify and publish, but maybe it doesn't give the full picture as to what is going on in that department and similar figures in other departments. So I think we're going in the right direction, but the proof of the pudding will be when it's baked.
Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. And I think from my perspective, I concur with Councillor Bacon in that we are moving forward with this in a really positive way. Taking some learning from across the UK in terms of improving our performance management framework. And I think we've alluded to it over the reports for the QPMR that have come to corporate scrutiny over the last couple of times. We've done some exception reporting, which saw an improvement to the last round of QPMR. And then when we do the review that brings forward the revised measures and how we report on them, I think we'll see even further improvements in the autumn.
Councillor Love.
Could I then recommend that we bring it back at some point for to look at the findings and outcomes on the work plan? I'm not just sure when that would be. When would be a reasonable time? But I think we should try to review the outcomes of the document. That would be an important thing to do.
Yeah, as the report says, the refresh is due in October of this year, so hopefully around that time.
Yeah, fine.
Would that be a reasonable time to bring it back, or?
Please.
We can bring the framework back in October. I'm Debbie Downer, I'm Strategic Manager for Organisation Intelligence.
You on the microphone, sorry?
Yeah. Get it near. We can bring the framework back in October because that document will be refreshed and redone. In terms of bringing the outcomes of that and the delivery of the reporting, the revised measures, the revised metrics, the potential to use Power BI and deliver that more frequently will not be ready by October.
Yeah. So I think that's important then.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful because I think that's what we want, isn't it?
Yeah.
So therefore, perhaps in the new year, does that sound reasonable?
I would like to be able to trial it, test it, etc., rather than just present the next bit. I'd like it to be something that we've tried out and we've tested on our cabinet members and on our services, because it needs to be, dare I say it, it's got to work both ways. If you want it more regularly, it needs to be something that's useful to everybody and more easy to do. That brings us back to that Power BI conversation. One of our members, I can't remember quite which one, mentioned it last time we were talking about the QPMR and the ability where we can to automate that as much as possible so you can have it more frequently. And you may see it in a different format. We may view it on the screen because it'll be interactive. That's going to take some time. If we want to make a real step change, we need to take that time and do it properly.
So in a year then, do you think?
I'm hoping.
Councillor, how about we go for an update in the new year? But that may not be bringing it back as a full agenda item, but an update so we know progress is being made.
Sorry, Chair. The only reason I'm pushing is because I've got this thing about actually attaching, in outcome dates and times and targets. Whereas if you don't attach that, it just goes round the circle. So whilst I accept everything that you've said, I just think if within a year we could have. That would be good.
I take your point, Councillor Love. I prefer it to be sooner than the year. But if we could have an update in the new year, and that might lead to a full agenda item back sooner than a year from now. Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Chair. I was interested to note the reporting benefits in terms of dashboard usage. I think, just to sort of summarise what I think a lot of people here today have said is actually
there isn't enough ventilation of the issues that we face and enough urgency. And I don't know whether it's simply that I haven't seen it, but in terms of what's on the website, how the public can drill down to see, for example, that it's been, 700 days and we haven't acquired a house to add to our stock of affordable housing or something of that nature. I just wondered what is if we could have a little bit more information about how that's going to be implemented and what might be the timeframes just in relation to this report, the dashboard usage, I feel is something that would be helpful here and potentially to be rolled out further as well.
I think that's what I'm saying. I think the process needs to be iterative. And if you think about the number of services that we have to interact with for the QPMR, whether that be a business as usual activity, one of your capital programs, all of those things, we need to be building those in a way that you see the whole picture. So for me, when trying to deliver this, the framework, is pretty much all there anyway, but we will make it better. We will make it more, we'll add the tweaks that we need to add. The work needs to happen with the directorates to understand which elements are going to be useful. We talked about the metric refresh. Some of the metrics now have been there, I believe, for many, many years. We need to do that first so that what we've got left and what's going to be useful is the stuff that we put into those Power BI dashboards. And when I said about viewing it on the screen, that we can then publish. I think I mentioned the issue about Power BI licensing within the report. And again, that's something we'll have to pick up and potentially fund if we want to do certain things around that publishing piece with the information that we've got in some of the service areas to make sure it's secure when we do publish it.
Anything else before we finish? No. Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. Oh, so I do apologise. On a different page, members' questions. Well, I knew there wouldn't be. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. See you next time.